Okay, I'm recording stuff right now, Steve. So one second. Oh, it's molasses. Okay, I'm going to take you through updating your learning log for chapter 2. First of all, I want you to add in something on this list right here. This is a little extra. Okay, and in the extra part, we're going to add a learning log entry on real world meaning of slope and Y-intercept. Okay. So far, you should have this multiple representation web in here, this information about finding M and B from the different formats. You should also have this page in here, the math notes on how to find the slope of a line. Okay. So turn to the next page, and the page I want you to glue in next is this one. Okay, so go ahead and glue that on the next page. These are math notes on how to write the equation of a line from a graph. So there are kind of two important things in here. If you have a graph and you're trying to develop the equation, it talks about that you need two things. You need the slope and the y-intercept. The slope can be found by making a triangle, a slope triangle, and finding the change in y versus the change in x. Okay, change in y is 1, change in x is 3, so our slope is just a third. And then by finding the y-intercept by just looking at the graph on where it touches at 0, which is that's 2. Okay. The second math notes were about x and y-intercepts. The x-intercept happens when y is 0. It's the x value. The y-intercept happens when x is 0. It's the y value. And you had a few on homework like this. So I think I want to talk about this now with another example. Let's say I had the equation negative 3x plus, let's see, 6y is equal to 12. Okay. If I wanted to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept, what I'd be doing is I don't.
You don't have that?
Yeah. So I'm trying to make a video for a class. So I'm going to now have to edit. Okay, so if I were going to try and look at this and find the x-intercept and the y-intercept, the x-intercept happens when y is 0. So I could find that by replacing y with 0 and figuring out what x is. Okay, so now if I worked with the equation, then I'd find out that when y is 0, x would have to be negative 4. So when y is 0, x would be negative 4. So that would be my x-intercept. If I wanted to, in this equation, find the y-intercept, okay, the y-intercept happens when x is 0, so I could replace x with 0 and figure out what y is. So I'd get 6y is equal to 12, so y would have to be 2, okay? So when x is 0, y is 2. So you can always work with the equations, and we'll be exploring these equations later. It's just the standard form of a linear. But you can find the x and the y-intercepts by making either the x value 0 and finding y, or the y value 0 and finding x, okay? All right, so then the next thing in the agenda says to look over that web again. So if you think about that web that you have that you made previously, on the quiz on Monday, you should be familiar with the links between all of these different modalities. So if you have a graph, you should be able to come up with a table, an equation, or a situation. and vice versa. Okay. All right, so I want to take a few notes on finding the equation of a line. So let's go ahead and just title this Finding the Equation of a Line through 2 points. Algebraically. Okay. I feel like I spelled that wrong. Okay, let's say we've got the points -5, 7, and 10, 1. Okay, and without making a table or a graph, let's say we want to try and find the equation. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is find the slope. Okay, you could use that labeling technique. Okay, where you take y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. So I'm going to take 1 minus 7, 10 minus -5, okay, and -7 over 15. I've got a slope of -2/5. Okay, so that starts me out. And then I'm going to use the equation y equals mx plus b and fill in what I know. Okay, so what you know so far is the slope. So I'm going to write y equals -2/5 x plus b. So I've replaced the m with what I know so far. Okay, so then our third step is we're going to plug in one of the points. For x and y, and then solve for b. Okay, so you can pick either of the 2 points that you want. I think I'm going to use 10, 1. So I'm going to replace y with 1 and x with 10. Okay, and then I'm just going to balance it out until I find b. So -2/5 times 10 is -4. I'm going to add 4. So 5 is equal to b. Okay, so now I've got my y-intercept. So my last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to write the equation. Okay, so y equals -2/5 x plus now my 5. Okay, so I found the equation of a line that goes through those 2 points. Okay. All right, so the last thing I want you to add, is this. Okay, so when we had this problem the other day, these graph problems, we were supposed to look at what the real world quantity of the slope and the y-intercept. Let's put this notes in. Let's go back. Okay, so real world meaning of slope. Okay, so the real world meaning of slope is the change in the dependent variable when the independent variable increases by 1. Okay, so let's look at that example then that you guys had on the Desmos activity. So the real world meaning would be the change in the dependent variable, which is the height, every time our independent variable, which is the years, went up by 1. So it's basically how much the tree grew per year. So and you could figure that out by making a slope triangle and just dividing those. Okay, so basically it went from 4 to 14 over 5 years. So 10 feet over 5 years would be 2. Okay, so the real world meaning is that it was growing 2 feet per year. Okay, and the next one, oh gosh, it's not going to let me click on that, is it? Shoot. Okay, so you do kind of the same idea for the next one. It would be every time our independent variable changes by 1. All right, so how about, can I get a cursor here? Yeah. Mouse, okay. Maybe that won't work. Okay, did it go to the next slide? Okay, so for this one, the real world meaning of the slope is every time my independent variable went up by 1, so each month, okay, it's my bank balance, okay, so the change in my bank balance per month, okay, so and it looks like between these 2 months, 2 months has passed and my bank balance has dropped $20, so it's losing $10 per month. Okay, if I look at the next one, my dependent variable is distance, and this is gallons. Okay, over 2 more gallons, it gained 44 miles, so it's gaining 22 miles per gallon. Okay, so it's the amount this is increasing by when this goes up by 1. Okay, all right, so how about the real world quantity that the Y-intercept is? Okay, let's write something down about that. I can get this to work again. Okay, so this is the real world meaning of the slope. Okay, what's the real world meaning of our Y-intercept? Okay, that's the amount of the dependent variable when the independent variable is 0. Okay, so it's the amount of the dependent variable when the independent variable is 0. Let's look at those examples again. Okay, so basically if I go to 0, it's the height of the tree when it was planted. Oh, shoot. Mouse. Come on. Change to the mouse, please. Oh, okay, did it? Okay, so it's the bank balance when 0 months have passed. It's the distance traveled when 0 gallons of gas have been used. Okay, so hopefully you've added that. Let me go back to this, to your notes. And if you're given a graph, you can actually find the real world meaning of the slope. Okay, so make sure you're thinking unit rate, real world meaning of the Y-intercept, amount the dependent variable is when the independent variable is 0. Okay, done.